How should organizations adopt emerging technology at scale?
How do organizations justify value and return on investment?
And as we do that, what are the top technology offerings and what are we seeing in the market?
What's working and what's not?
I'm Prashant Kelkar,
And I'm Dorotea Bajkovic.
and welcome to our Masterclass series. We're starting a new videocast series where we're going to explore exactly these kind of questions for emerging technology trends. We're going to be starting with, of course, the flavor of the season, AI, because it's not enough to talk about AI. We need to talk about it at enterprise scale. So, Dorothea, here we are again. And the last time we spoke, when we were in our session together, we spoke a lot about these four buckets of use cases. Just to recap, for those who hadn't learned or heard the last episode, it was knowledge work, augmented knowledge work. The second was customer experience and how that can be sentient. And then there were two buckets where we are seeing a lot of ideas, but maybe not so much action, and that was in intuitive and autonomous product creation, and the fourth one being cognitive twins and threads, where one should think not just within the enterprise but also within the ecosystem. And the last time we spoke, we ended by saying, well, all that's good and fine, and these are use cases. They're going to show up in applications. Now I know what's going through my head, and I'm probably sure it's going through your head. What happens to those 3,800 applications in the existing enterprise? Do they go away? Or do we just read this thing where some Gen AI is going to generate source code? And now is that source code going to replace these applications? That's going to be our topic for today. And of
Mhm.
course, with you and me, we're going to get the American view and we're going to get a European view, and both are right because
Exactly.
you have multiple industries and they think different. Why don't you
Exactly.
kick us? Why don't you kick us off, Dorothea?
So your original question, those 3,800 and counting, and what we're talking about is application types, not different software. There is so much of that. Did the mainframe ever go away? No. And those
No.
original systems are not going to go away either because they serve a purpose for the foundations that we talked about. They need to exist. And what are we talking about? We're talking about CRMs, ERPs. They might be the bane of existence for some people, but we need them to still continue. And Gen AI can, create insights, but it's not going to replace these ones at all. And that's what you and I refer to as the system of record. We need our record keeping. It's no longer the physical ones that are down in vaults, and there's some people with glasses having a look, diligently reviewing A to Z, categorization from 1 to 100. This is done digitally, and this is almost the world where augmented knowledge work can help. We cannot get rid of it. It has to exist, and it has to be there in terms of the integrity of that data. But what we're seeing is a little bit of a change. And this is where I know that you're really excited about this, and you call it something different, don't you, Prashant?
Yeah. And that's where I think it's these systems are not going to go away because you need to go into a system of record and say, okay, how am I going to close my quarter three?
Mm-hmm.
What are the revenues? What's the EBITDA for quarter three? You need a system of record for that. We
Mm-hmm.
think we're going to see a brand new class of systems, and we're calling these systems of intelligence. They're going to do very different things. This is not about generating code. Let's not fall for what the system integrators are doing.
Mm.
Let's start talking about what they're creating.
Mm-hmm.
They're creating is systems that will auto-generate things. So to your example from the last time we spoke, how do you auto-generate 6 different scenarios and versions for the same product, an expensive purse?
Mm-hmm.
Are there 6 ways of doing that? So auto-generation systems in
Mm-hmm.
engineering R&D. There'll be prediction systems. So it's not just about what's going to be my sales pipeline and forecast for next week. Could you show us 6 ways of getting to the revenue we just promised to the quarter?
Mm-hmm.
Auto generate scenarios. So use the data from the ERP system. Now comes the big but. But don't just predict what can happen. Generate a scenario to get there. If you got a 46 million gap, what are the 6 scenarios to get there?
Mm-hmm.
Which are the sales opportunities which you can get at accelerated, which are the ones the team should chase vis-a-vis the others.
Mm-hmm.
These are prediction systems. But now the generation part can auto-generate this and create this, bring this into human language
Mm-hmm.
that a sales team can take action on.
Mm-hmm.
And based on that, there's also the recommendation systems. The recommendation system would say, okay, of these six scenarios, we see one and number one and four most likely. Have a look at the other three or four, but we see one and four most likely.
Mm-hmm.
The human comes back in the loop. It's not the AI deciding for the rest of the firm.
Mm.
Got these six scenarios, you got a starting point to start discussion. Now the human can say, it doesn't make sense to sell anything in Canada now because of XYZ.
Mm-hmm.
You can still influence things, but you'll start seeing these. And I think we're going to see more generation systems, prediction systems, recommendation systems, forecasting systems, optimizing systems. And like we said, is the first time we work, there are going to be many, many action verbs coming in,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Systems of intelligence. How should one think about these systems of intelligence, Dorothea? What do you think?
And that's where it has to be based on the purpose of what your core of the company is. And we talked a little bit about that in overall architecture, but now we're talking about the application side. What do you want to actually be building in terms of your core capability? That's going to be in applications versus what's going to be done as part of the systems of record, potentially with a partner. How does that actually be done in that regard? So, what do you value as intelligence in your organization or research institute, whatever it might be? And that all of a sudden becomes the question that you were talking about in that wonderful example in the third episode that we talked to on the chief learning officer. So, what do you value that you want your teams, your organization to actually be learning and reflecting on and continuing to develop and build? And what does good look like next quarter, next year, next 10 years, maybe even potentially in the next 100 years? Because when you've got that, then you actually have a benchmark. This is what I value in terms of the intelligence. Now, psychologists will actually say there's many different types of intelligence, and there is. There is things around what you can do with music. There is things around what you can do with the logic and computation. Not every application is the same. And why is this important? Then you know how to architect for it. And we touched upon this in one of our episodes, saying the architecture is very different based on what the purpose is. So you have it for your organization, then how do you do it for your systems of intelligence? It's not going to be built like an ERP, most certainly not. The level of quality also might be, I should maybe err on the caution, but it's not that it's lesser, it's got a different threshold of what it's trying to achieve based on this. So recommendation system, is it really that wrong if they recommend a movie to you that's not quite right, but you've got to experience something different? And it was French subtitles. So what? Is that really so bad if you don't speak French? Maybe not, depending on what that experience is.
And you make excellent points because now all that you just said is going to bring back the question a company is always asked, and that is, what is core and what is context?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Context, use packaged applications. Core
Mm-hmm.
remains core. You'll never find a solution for your unique problem or your unique differentiation in the market. So
No.
maybe we are coming away from these old words. You remember we used to talk about packaged applications, go use packaged applications. And then
Yes.
you have custom build applications. Remember that word? Maybe I'm dating myself when I start saying these things. But so you say you have custom build applications, packaged applications. That thinking was not wrong. I think they should be replaced by saying packaged applications may be systems of record, custom applications may be systems of intelligence. And that thing it was still true 10 years ago, except those that thing now looks different. Now it auto generates, it predicts, it recommends, it forecasts, it optimizes. Brand new source code coming in. You think there'll be you think this will be custom built for enterprises? Do you see brand new software packages coming up?
I think
I don't want to be that CIO who has to take these buy versus build decisions today, but how should one even think buy versus build in terms of software?
it's an
What do you think?
excellent question. It's an excellent one. And it's exactly what I guess even CIOs were doing 5 years ago, saying, do I need software engineers or do I just buy these practices? But then it goes back to what is core and what's going to help us there. If we're going to be knowledge workers and data workers, then maybe the answer is yes, because you want to be managing that process yourself. You want to know what's going into that code because the value is there about the knowledge. But if yours is maybe more about, I want to see the outcome of that, and I know how to test my quality at the outcome, and I know what the inputs and outputs are there, do I need all of this? Maybe not. But that's then the question that you need to partner with the right people to get you there, to get first the strategy, the decision for that, and then also, does it make sense in the maintenance phase? Maybe the first version you buy, 5 years later you learn, and then you start building yourself, or you acquire the company. Maybe you do a co-creation. There is many different versions of this completely. So the systems of record, systems of intelligence, but when we know intelligence needs something to get that awareness. And there's one other system that's almost sits across that. It's just like our eyes and fingers, our sense of smell and taste. And I like the name that you've got for this because it's not too creepy, but you've got the systems of engagement. Can you dive a little bit more for people to understand why is that different to that record and intelligence? I really like that piece.
So the systems of engagement has been around for a few years, and it is any form factor. It's any form factor with which you experience things. So what form factor is just business English for saying what do you use to experience. So it could be your desktop. Desktop is a form factor. A browser is a form factor. Your mobile is a form factor. Your app in the mobile is a form factor. And then the season of last year, the metaverse, which let's see when it comes back again, that's also a form factor, right? And maybe it does thanks to Apple and what it's pushing on AR and VR. So AR and VR is also a form factor, makes glasses a form factor. So there will be increasing levels of form factor. Is that good? Yes, it's good. um, does it create more confusion? Yes, it does, because now you need a journey continuity across each form factor. I don't want to start something on a desktop and not have it continue when I wear my glasses. I want to be able to do something at my desk in terms of product design, but when I go to the shop floor and I put my glasses on, I want to see exactly the same thing. That's going to be tricky because journey continuity across all these form factors, and they are increasing one by one, is where companies are breaking their teeth at the moment. Now put the systems of record, they do their job. The systems of engagement which we've been having and we're adding one by one, something should bring these two levels together. Something should bring these two levels together. And here's where my hope is, Dorothea. My hope is that we don't go and hire 800 software engineers to start coding how the continuity in the journey should be across the form factor. My hope is these brand new systems of intelligence can actually figure that out. What if we could actually figure that out, right? So what if the system could figure out what should be recommended? You don't need to code it. You don't need to code it. So we're entering a world where coding is probably not your number one activity, because your system is coding itself. Because at the end of the day, an AI is an algorithm which continuously changes. You have code which is continuously changing itself anyway. So I think we're going away from the land of source code to continuous code. And continuous code is probably bringing the systems of engagement and the systems of record together. And that's the intelligent layer. Now, that's probably going to be wonderful for all of us. I just don't know how should start designing for this when you have, remember, those 3,800 applications sitting in the back, right? So I think we are entering a new world where we are thinking in multi dimensions. The first dimension is, as you rightly pointed out, what is core and context? The second dimension is, should I build this, or should I wait for it, or should I buy it? And then the last thing that you raised is very, very key, and we tend to forget that is, don't do it alone. Should you partner for it? Does someone have half the solution? Can you co-invest, co-create, and maybe acquire or take a stake in that company? I think the job of a CIO or a CTO just got difficult.
but it got elevated as well. So I think this is actually where they have more autonomy and decision making for the organization rather than just being the service provider of these IT and technology services. So it's actually a pivotal role for these organizations. And what I like about this is if you think of it more as these organic products, that means you need to really nurture it. We've had that conversation about that, really nurturing it. And then you have to have a look at, we don't need coders, and we're not saying we're getting rid of people. They'll be maybe evolving into different types of software engineers, which are more cognitive in nature. So an engineer
Hmm.
at their core, they have to understand the business problem, not just coding and scripting. Then they find a solution that is tailored for their needs alongside with the data scientists, business analysts, all together as one combined team. So if you start looking at it, what does it have day one versus day 10, day 50? All of a sudden, this cognitive work of I've got my eyes, ears in engagement. I've got my data feeds coming into long-term memory from the records, but I need to build this into something intelligent. It changes your mentality of input, output, computation, and logic. How does it look like in that multi-dimensional space that you're referring to? What does it actually have? And then all of a sudden, things like, hold on, not everyone potentially can see in that regard. How do I make this more accessible for them if they can't use these particular systems of engagement? I'm not saying they can't participate in the system. I'm going to give them a different experience for this. Maybe they can't speak the language, no problem. How do I control that there so they can still, again, participate there? So I think all of a sudden we're going to be seeing, like the scientists of the space, like the doctors, we're going to have these software doctors that give diagnostics in that lens, potentially, potentially.
True. And right in all what you just said, there was one very, very important point that I think we should talk about.
Mm.
You spoke of applications. You just opened a Pandora's box on data. Because now I think we are entering a new world, and
Yes.
react to my hypothesis now. You keep reacting to my hypotheses. Um, I think we are entering a world where it's no longer we are storing data in systems. That's system of record world. I think we are entering a new world where the systems are creating data, and these are the systems of intelligence. So imagine data being stored, but data is also being created by systems. Are we entering a new world where there are these two worlds of data? Are they two different things? Should they clash? Data is nothing without its context. Data is always useful only if it's taken in the context of its applications. Oh my God, where do you store it if it's not in the applications? Are we entering this new world and we're going to call this the data spine? How did one even start thinking about that? What
And
do you
this is
think?
this is where I think that we do need to have reference and inspiration from organic systems because they look more than just this binary way. And this is why the power, and I do not mean this to be another buzzword, but the applications of things like quantum can allow these two states to happen in parallel. And that's where we can see this intelligence then take that next level up. It's still very much research. We're not going to cover too much in these episodes, but it's actually having a look at, yes, we might not be able to process all this together. And when we say creating data, we're not talking about metadata. That's already happening right now. That's not what we're referring to. We're talking about that level of creating of the intelligence and knowledge that can be used to remember those use cases, creating different products, creating the augmentation of the knowledge work, potentially down those other two lines. How does that get done automatically and again with the human co-pilot there? Have we got it? No. Is there a blueprint for that architecture? Not yet. But if we know what we can start building on top of that, what is that context? I think we can get there in the next, I want to say 3 years, but I think it's going to be probably 5 years until it's scalable for everyone. But we will see some of these companies doing it in the next couple of years, a few of those trailblazers.
And as we look at these 5 years, we're going to see buy versus build decisions happening and changing because new products come up. So, who's the next new Salesforce? Who's the next new SAP? Who knows, right? Who knows?
No.
We're going to see core versus context changing because some of our clients are going to say, this is so core, we want to hire our own people. We want people with our DNA doing things. And then there are jobs for partners too. But, this time we want to have our own folks and we're going to have partners stepping in and say, you know what, you can do it, you can wish this, but you might not have the skills to build it. So we'll build it, operate it, and can transfer these skills to you. So we'll see a little bit of that. We already start seeing this in the global captive explosion, the global capability centers explosion across the industry. And then at the end of the day, it is always what happens to your existing landscape, what happens to systems of record, what are your new systems of intelligence. It feels like the two new skills we need are enterprise architecture, suddenly more and more important. Now's the right time to invest in that. And the second is what you said at the beginning of this. Don't lose this golden opportunity to regain the seat at the table.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
If you are the thought leader on this in your organization, you're probably the person to show the way out, the way forward over the
Exactly.
next 5 years. So
Exactly.
maybe with that, Dorothea, it's time for our three takeaways again. And why don't you start with the first one?
With the application architecture, just like we talked about in some of these other instances, understanding what are you doing? Is it for building and maintaining the system of record? Is it the system of engagement? Is it the system of intelligence? Or is it that data spine? So how do you fit that into, and then how do you architect that together?
Perfect. I'll build on that. Second takeaway would be that now it's one has to think of source code differently. Implementing a system of record is very different from implementing a system of intelligence, because now you're dealing with foundational models, you're tuning them with data. It's not coding in that sense, because now you're tuning the model to create its own source code. So one has to also think of implementation effort and skills in a very different way. And
And
you
on
will
the
bring us
skill,
home with the third one.
yes, as the sun is setting here in Germany before it gets dark here, the third one is around what you were talking about, skills. What are those skills for the people that can bring this in? And it's not necessarily, of course, we need the deep technical, but it's also those people that look at it holistically. How we diagnose this organic product, service, whatever you're building, and really having that view and that future and that strategic thinking. Enterprise architects, you're making a resurgence.
Fantastic, Dorothea. Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure with you. I don't know how many topics we're going to be recording in the future, but if you ask me, maybe 6 months down the line, this episode might be the most important, or one of the most important episodes, because this is where we land the plane. This is where we get off the holding pattern. Enterprise architecture. It has to land on the applications.
Indeed. And thank you, Prashant. Likewise, always a pleasure.
See you next time.
See you.